everyone, my name is Sally Fowler. I'm the owner and trainer for Disabled Advantage Dog Training and Consulting LLC. This video is going to give you a demonstration of some of the exercises that are done in Foundation Obedience Section 1 Lesson 6 and Section 2 Lesson 2, just to give you a better understanding of how to fit a lot of different training exercises into a 15-minute time block. And one thing I recommend that you'll actually see me doing in this video is I recommend before you even get started doing your training session, look through your assigned list of homework exercises and pick out a few. Pick out 6 to 8 exercises, make a list, write them down on a fresh piece of paper, and put that piece of paper somewhere within reach so that mid-training you can stop and glance at it real quick. I have mine on the couch, so occasionally you'll see me step off to the couch and kind of look for a little bit. That's me checking my list. The second thing I recommend you do is you set an actual timer. That way you're not trying to keep track of, okay, I need to do this command for 30 seconds, but I also have to have a clock running in my head to do training for 15 minutes. That's just way too complicated, guys. Just set a timer for 15 minutes. It'll tell you when the training session is over. Making a list and sticking to a timer can help your training sessions go faster, because trying to hold all of these exercises that I've assigned you in your head every time you go to work with your dog can be kind of overwhelming. There's so much to remember to work on that trying to stop and think about it makes training take sometimes even twice as long as it should have to take. So making a list ahead of time can help you save time in the long run, because you're just focusing on those particular exercises. You're not trying to get everything accomplished in a short amount of time. I'm going to demonstrate that you don't need to use your release cue after every single command. That takes up a lot of time. It's much easier to just gently slide into the next command, and you'll see me doing that a lot with front. Front is a really great transitional exercise. It gets practice in and it moves the dog to a new location in the room. One way to tackle training sessions is to look at your exercises and go, okay, I need to do 6 out to the side for 1 minute 5 times. And you just do sit out to the side 5 times in a row, and then you move to the next sit exercise and the next sit exercise. And then you're like, okay, I spent 15 minutes doing sit. That's awesome. Or you do exercise A of sit, and exercise A of down, and exercise A of come, but there's not a whole lot of variation. You're just doing it one after another, getting all your reps in, and that's what you're focusing on. And if that's the way you want to do things, that's fine, but it can make training more boring for both you and your dog. So another way to set up your training session is to not do that and instead think to yourself, okay, I'm going to do sit out to the side for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to move closer to my dog and call them to come, and then I'm going to do a few transitions, and then I'm going to do release and walk them around a little bit to reposition them to a corner so that I can practice out of sight stand. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to do sit again for 2 minutes out to the side, and then I'm going to move close back to their side and I'm going to ask them to lay down, and then I'm going to move out 2 minutes, and so forth and so on. And you end up getting your 5 to 7 repetitions in, but it's way less boring. It's a little bit more chaotic, so it can take some time to get used to doing training this way, but it'll keep things more interesting for your dog. One way to help yourself manage this is to use a tally marker app on your phone. In this video session, you'll see me do 6 foot front by Q, sit and down transitions by Robbie, stand 6 feet away for 1 minute, stand out of sight for 5 seconds, barrier heel slightly offset, and some along the barrier, place for a few minutes, up and off on Q, and sit with a little bit of pressure. So I've got Robbie on a 6-foot leash with his training collar, and I'm going to check my list real quick to see what we're doing. And I start out by asking him to do some sit-down transitions. He's a little slow, but he does do them. And you want to remember to stay close to your dog while you're doing your transitions for right now, because your dog hasn't learned how to do sit and down from a distance yet. And here I'm calling him to front. And he wasn't quite in the right spot, so I waited and I used the leash to guide him into the right spot, and then I praised him. And here I'm going to do some more transitions. So this is just one example. Started out, transitions, moved to a front to go to a new spot in the room, more transitions. And I could have released him, but front is a really great way to move your dog around the room and move them to different spots, which moves them closer or further away from certain distractions, and then mix in other things. And when you do your transitions, you might want to try to stick to just doing 3 to 5 at a time, depending on how much your dog loves drill work. Robbie hates drill work, so we usually stick to about 3 at a time, and then I do something different. So I call him to front again, and I use the leash. Notice how I'm reeling the leash up and using it to help guide him into the right spot. And as he comes, I say, good, 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 good. And then I praise him. Good front. And bridging that praise just helps him understand you're doing the right thing. Keep doing it. Keep on coming. And here I'm going to work on my out of sight stand, and notice how I pivoted away from him for a little bit. And I'm going to hold my hand up here so you can see that I'm counting to 5. You don't need to do that with your dog. I just wanted to show you guys that I was counting for a short amount of time. And then you return to him, and anytime you want to move away from your dog, they don't have to be in heel. If you want to work on heel, go for it. But if you don't want to work on heel, you don't have to always be in heel when you're just doing a general training session. Use let's go instead of heel, and that tells your dog they don't have to be in a specific spot. Here we're working on place for a little bit. Notice how I'm still standing close to him, but I'm not overly petting him or giving him too much attention. We're just sort of both existing there for a little bit. When I'm ready, I give him a cue with the leash to move forward. And with place, you can start saying off, or you can use your release cue, whatever you decide. And here we're working on up and off. And Robbie knows up and off really well, but he was a little dubious of the chair being slippery, so we moved pretty slow. And when he struggles, I just give the leash a light tug and release, and then another one. And he was still resisting, so I made the choice to walk away and reapproach. That's sometimes the best way to get your dog to do something that they're a little uncertain of, is if you just take a step back, walk around, come back to it, they're usually a little bit more willing to go forward with it. You don't want to make a habit of doing that every time, because then your dog can start to think, oh, we can just leave. So you do want to encourage them with the leash. And you'll see me do several repetitions of it. On that last one, he was a lot more willing and a lot more eager to get up on the chair. If you have a bigger dog, just be mindful of their size and kind of help stand in front of the chair so that they don't accidentally fall off of it. Here we're going to do our barrier exercise. And I'm in a really small room. There's not a whole lot of a barrier, but I can do 1 repetition of the barrier exercise. We go forward and he auto sits. And that was really good. And in this example, we're really close to the barrier. So I'm doing this to sort of refresh his brain on what a barrier is. But this next set, we're pretty far away from the stove and his hammock. And so that's us doing the barrier offset a little bit. He doesn't have a perfect fence to keep him in line. But then we go back to the couch to keep him in line a little bit, and then we keep going around. You want to eventually, obviously, get to a point where you can do this without your dog being right up alongside a barrier. So practicing this exercise a little bit off a barrier, as I'm doing here, and a little bit on a barrier can help them start to learn, oh, we're still doing the same thing. I understand. I don't need a fence here to tell me where heel is. I know where heel is. I've got this. I can do this. And Robbie did a really great job. And now we're going to slide back into front. So some of these you will see I am doing, okay, let's do 5 repetitions of front. Let's do 5 repetitions of barrier heel. But then some of the other ones I'm also doing, let's do some sit down transitions and then front and then more transitions and then stand and then do 5 repetitions of something. How you set up a training exercise depends on your energy level, your dog's energy level, your dog's focus level, and it also depends on what's going on in that room. So Robbie didn't have a whole lot of drive in this particular instance, and so I needed to try and not do just a bunch of the same over and over again. I needed to mix it up a little bit. And you'll notice I keep going back to the couch. I check my list. I see what's going on. And then I go back to working with him. So here I'm going to stand close to him and ask him to stand, which he did a really great job on. And you want to remember to switch the clip on your collar to your dead ring, or if you're using 2 leashes, switch what leash you're holding. I'm doing a fur rub and applying the leash pressure out in front of him. And here I didn't step out away from him quite as well as I'd wanted to. So I actually go back to his side and I reiterate the fur rub, and then I take more measured steps to pivot in front of him to let him know I definitely want you to stay in this one spot. He did it right the first time around, but I just wanted to make sure we were both having the same conversation. So this is standing 6 feet away from him in front of him for a minute, and you'll see me incorporate 2 leash tugs out to the front. They're very small. I'm not pulling on him that hard, but it helps to reinforce I want you to remain standing, and that's the power of the dead ring that we've talked about. This will be really helpful when we get to being even further away from your dog, that they need to stand still. And he's doing a really good job. He's turning his head a little bit, but I really don't care about that because he's not curving his shoulders around to look behind himself. At this point, that's what we care about more. In this instance, if he's just looking around a little bit, that's okay. If he were to turn his head more to where his shoulders started to move, that would be something worth correcting. I go back to him and I praise him, and I remember to change the leash clip. If you try to walk off with your dog and say, let's go, even if they do move forward while you're pulling on the dead ring, you're undoing a bunch of your stand work accidentally. And trust me, I've done it myself. So it'll happen, but try to remember to switch your leash clip. We're going to do out of sight stand again for a short burst of time. Out of sight is one that you can do. You just return to their side and you leave them at stand, or you do some sit down transitions, or you walk off in a circle like I did here, and then you come back to the wall and do stand out of sight. If your dog is really, really attached to you, they might struggle with this exercise. And so doing it you don't want to leave your dog in a stand for 5 minutes while you do this exercise 5 times in a row, basically. You do want to give them something else to do in between. You want to walk a circle and then put them back in stand, or you want to call them to front and put them back in stand, or you want to do some sit down transitions alongside the wall and then put them back in a stand. Just something to add a little bit of variety there. I'm going to say front and good, 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 and reel him up with the leash. And it's not that he's doing anything wrong with front there. It's just that I want to reinforce where he's coming to and that he needs to sit down. If I leave the leash slack the entire time, I'm not giving us a really good way to reinforce, hey, this is what I want you to be doing if he happens to make a mistake. And I stop and I guide him onto place. And you'll see I'm about a foot away from the placemat. That's where we're going to be working with this next round of exercises, is you stop just shy of the placemat instead of walking all the way up to the placemat with your dog. Stopping about 1 to 2 feet away and sending your dog to the placemat starts to help develop their ability and their confidence to go to a place and move away from you, which is really important for place. And that starts here. But once he's on place, I move closer to the placemat. It's important to understand that asking a dog to do something at a distance and then doing the thing in the distance are different in a dog's head. So with place, we're going to start sending them from further and further away, but for the time being, we're still going to be close to them once they're on the placemat. That also helps ensure that they're going to stay on the placemat. We're right there if they start to think about leaving. Eventually, we'll get to where we send them from far away and we stay far away, but us being far away from our dog is an added challenge for them. So we want to introduce these challenges a little bit at a time, as opposed to just throwing all of the things at your dog all at once. It's the same as, we're starting out with teaching sit and down close to the dog, and then we move away from the dog for a bit, and then we come back. And in later lessons, you'll start to ask the dog to do sit and down from a distance and expect them to remain at that distance and do the thing. But we have to teach our dogs to be really confident about being far away from us before we can start to ask them to do things far away from us. And here I use my release cue to cue him off. You want to make sure your release cues are always really clear to the dog. And this exercise is a new exercise for teaching your dog to be okay with pressure. So I've dropped my leash. And when I walk past him, I say yes for remaining in a sit. Yes. And then I'm going to move to being about 3 feet away from him. Yes. Yes. And that's it. That's the exercise. You do want to do it on both sides of your dog. I just didn't have the physical space in my house to do it on both sides of my dog. And you'll do that one with both sit and down. But that exercise is to start preparing them for being out in public if you go to the pet store or someplace else and people are passing by your dog and you want them to stay in a command and stay fairly focused on you. And looky here, more sit-down transitions. Robbie just loves those. And here I switch it up a little bit, and instead of doing sit-down transitions, I do down-to-stand transitions. So you do want to start incorporating stand into your transitional work because it's a command that your dog needs to be able to do pretty fluidly. And it can be harder for some dogs if you've routinely practiced sit to stand. Suddenly going from down to stand seems like a foreign language. So you might have to revert back to your ask, tell, demand policy. But do what you need to do to help your dog learn these exercises. And you want to always try to end with something fun. So I'm going to end with a few more fronts because that's something that Robbie's pretty good at. He's losing a little bit of steam here. And you'll notice I'm doing some where I'm behind him and I'm wiggling here to try to get him more pepped up and his tail started wagging, as you could tell. Wiggling makes your dog more excited usually. So if your dog needs a little pep, wiggling yourself or taking a few steps back can really help give them a little bit more drive. And here we're out of time, and so I give Robbie his release cue, and he can go back to his soft placemat in the other room. Right, so you want to end on something fun. Front is something that my dog really likes, and so it's a good thing to end a long training session on, and it helps you get in just a few more reps of that one exercise. I hope this video has been helpful to you guys for watching and seeing how I personally choose to compose a training session. Again, I showed 6-foot front, some sit down transitions and some down and stand transitions, stand from 6 feet away, standing out of sight, barrier heel work, place work up and off, and sit with pressure. And that's just one example of some of the exercises that fit well together. If you aren't sure about what exercises fit well together, ask me. I've got a really good understanding of what works well together, and I'm happy to give you tips on how to shape your training sessions so that they're more fun for you and your dog. Because I hate for you guys to be bored doing this stuff. Some of the exercises are kind of dull, which I understand, but finding ways to make it more fun and more creative for you and your dog will make you look forward to your training exercises at home as opposed to dreading them like an evil chore you have to get done. If you have any questions about this video, send me an email or bring it up in our next session. Thank you for watching.